My name is Duncan Fraser, and I am the last commercial fisherman working Loch Ness. Not by choice, you understand, but by attrition. The others left years ago, driven away by declining catches, increasing regulations, and the endless parade of tourists who treat the loch like an amusement park rather than a living body of water that has fed families for generations. I am 68 years old. I have fished these waters for 53 years, since I was 15 and my father first let me handle the nets on his boat. I have seen things in that time, things that would make the monster hunters and the television crews wet themselves with excitement, but I have never spoken of them. Not to journalists. Not to scientists. Not even to my own children, who moved to Glasgow years ago and haven't returned except for obligatory visits at Christmas. But I'm speaking now. Because yesterday morning, for the first time in 5 decades of fishing, the creature came close enough for me to look it in the eye. And what I saw there changed everything I thought I knew about the loch, about the legend, about the nature of the thing we've been calling a monster all these years. It's not a monster. God help me, it's not a monster at all. I'm recording this in my cottage in Foyers, a village on the southeastern shore that most tourists drive through without stopping. The cottage belonged to my father, and his father before him, and his father before that. Frasers have lived in this house since it was built in 1847. The walls are thick stone, the roof is slate that's lasted a century and a half, and from the kitchen window I can see the loch, dark and still in the evening light. My boat is tied up at the small dock below the house. The Morag's Pride, named for my late wife who died of cancer in 1982. 36 feet of weathered wood and rusting equipment, barely seaworthy by modern standards, but I know every plank and rivet. I've rebuilt her 3 times, nursed her through storms that should have sent her to the bottom, kept her running long after younger men would have scrapped her for parts. Tomorrow morning, I will take her out for the last time. Not to fish, the fishing is done, has been done for years, but to return something. To complete a transaction I've been part of without knowing it, to fulfill a bargain I never agreed to but am bound to nonetheless. But first, I need to tell you how I learned the truth. How 53 years of fishing taught me that the loch has been keeping a secret far stranger than any prehistoric survivor, far more profound than any undiscovered species. If you're listening to this, if you found this recording after I'm gone, then you need to hear the whole story. Subscribe to this channel because what I'm about to reveal will change everything you think you know about Loch Ness. Hit that like button if you're ready for the truth, the real truth, not the souvenir shop nonsense. Share this with anyone who's ever wondered what really lives in the deep water. Because I'm going to tell you, and once you know, you can't unknow it. This is my confession. This is my testimony. This is the truth about the thing in the loch. I learned to fish the way my father learned, and his father before him, through observation, through patience, through developing an intimate knowledge of the loch's moods and rhythms that can't be taught from books or sonar readings. The loch is temperamental, moody. Some days the fish are plentiful and the water is calm and you can pull in nets so full they strain the winch. Other days, you can work from dawn until dusk and catch nothing but weed and the occasional eel. The locals always said it depended on the lady's disposition, though no one could explain who or what the lady was. I thought it was just superstition. Fisher folk are superstitious by nature. We have to be when our livelihood depends on forces we can't control or predict. Don't whistle on the boat. Don't bring bananas aboard. Don't speak of drownings while on the water. 100 small rituals and prohibitions that make no logical sense but get followed anyway, just in case. But the lady was different. The lady was specific to Loch Ness. And the rules about her were very precise. Never fish the deep water on the dark of the moon, my father told me when I was 16, standing in the pre-dawn darkness as we prepared the nets. Never take more than you need. And if you see her, if you're blessed or cursed enough to catch a glimpse, you row away quiet-like and you thank her for letting you go. Her? I asked. You mean Nessie? My father's face went hard. Don't call it that. That's a tourist name. A stupid name. She's older than names, older than Scotland, older than anything you can imagine. She's the lady of the loch, and she lets us fish here by her grace. You disrespect her, you'll learn why the deep water is to be feared. I thought he was trying to scare me, the way fathers do when they want their sons to be careful. I nodded and kept my mouth shut and learned the trade. The first time I saw the creature was in the summer of 1959. I was 17, working the nets alone. My father was sick with pneumonia and someone had to bring in the catch. It was early morning, the mist still thick on the water, and I was hauling in the net when I felt the boat move. Not the gentle rocking of waves, but a deliberate displacement, as if something massive had passed directly beneath the hull. I froze, my hand still gripping the wet rope of the net. The water beside the boat began to roil, and then I saw it, a shape in the murk, dark and immense, moving with sinuous grace through the water. Just a shadow, really. A suggestion of size and power. But enough to make my 17-year-old heart hammer against my ribs like it wanted to escape. The shape circled the boat once. Twice. Then it was gone, descending into the depths, leaving only ripples that spread across the misty surface and eventually faded to nothing. I finished hauling the net. It was empty except for a single salmon, large and perfect, as if it had been placed there deliberately. I took it home and said nothing to my father about what I'd seen. But I thought about it. For days, for weeks, for months. And slowly, I began to notice patterns. The catches were never random. That was the first thing I noticed. On days when I fished respectfully, taking only what I needed, releasing the small fish, working quietly and carefully, the nets would come up full. On days when I was rushed or careless or greedy, trying to maximize my catch to make up for slow weeks, I would haul in nothing but empty nets and torn mesh. It took me years to accept what this meant. That something in the loch was watching, judging, deciding what we were allowed to take. I saw the creature perhaps a dozen times over the next decade. Always from a distance. Always as a shadow or a shape in the water, never close enough for details. Sometimes I would feel it beneath the boat, would sense the immense presence passing in the depths. Other times I would see the wake it left on the surface, a disturbance too large and too purposeful to be anything natural. The other fishermen saw it too, though most wouldn't admit it. We had an unspoken agreement not to discuss what we saw, not to give the tourists and the monster hunters any reason to descend on us with their cameras and their questions. The loch was our livelihood. We protected it. And in return, the creature, the lady, let us work the water. But the balance was delicate. And over the years, as tourism increased and the loch became famous and people started treating it like a circus attraction, the fishing got worse. By the 1970s, half the commercial fishermen had quit. The catches were too small, too unpredictable. The regulations from the government were too restrictive. And there were rumors, whispered in the pubs late at night when the drink loosened tongues, that the lady was angry. That she was tired of the intrusion, the boats, the sonar equipment, the divers and the submarines and the endless parade of fools looking for proof of something they wouldn't understand even if they found it. 3 fishermen died in 1976. Their boat was found capsized near Urquhart Bay, the hull crushed from below as if something massive had risen beneath it and simply pushed until the wood splintered. No bodies were recovered. The official explanation was structural failure, a rotten keel giving way in rough water. But I knew better. Those men had been fishing the deep water during the dark of the moon, using drift nets that scraped the bottom and took everything: salmon, trout, char, pike, even the small fish that were supposed to be protected. They'd been greedy, disrespectful, and the lady had reminded them who the loch truly belonged to. I married Morag in 1978. She was a teacher from Inverness, practical and sharp-witted, and she thought my superstitions about the loch were charming in the way city people find rural traditions quaint and harmless. I tried to explain once, tried to tell her that the creature was real and we lived by her sufferance, but she laughed and kissed me and told me I read too many old legends. I stopped trying to explain after that. Some truths can't be shared with people who haven't earned them. Before I tell you what happened next, what I discovered that changed everything, I need you to understand something. The creature in Loch Ness isn't what you think it is. It's not what anyone thinks it is. And once I tell you the truth, you won't be able to look at any deep water the same way again. Subscribe now if you're ready. Hit that like button if you believe some mysteries exist for a reason. Because what comes next is where everything changes. Morag died in 1982, and I was alone again with the loch and the boat and the creature that watched from the depths. And slowly, over the years that followed, I began to understand what my father had tried to teach me all those years ago. The lady wasn't just a creature. She was the loch itself, or something so deeply intertwined with it that the distinction no longer mattered. 1985 was the year everything fell apart. Not just for me, but for every fisherman still working the loch. The fish simply stopped. Not disappeared. There were still fish in the loch, we could see them on the sonar, could watch them moving in the shallows. But they wouldn't take the nets. It was as if an invisible barrier had been placed around every school, every feeding ground, every place where fish should have been catchable. We would drop our nets in water teeming with salmon and pull them up empty. Not even a single fish. Not even by accident. The other fishermen blamed pollution, blamed the government, blamed climate change, blamed everything except the truth that we all knew but wouldn't speak. The lady was cutting us off. After generations of allowing us to fish her waters, she was closing the loch to us. By the end of that year, I was the only commercial fisherman left. The others had sold their boats, moved away, found other work. But I couldn't leave. The cottage was mine, paid for with generations of fishing. The boat was mine, rebuilt with my own hands. And more than that, I felt bound to the loch in a way I couldn't articulate. Leaving felt like betrayal. Like abandoning a trust I'd been born into. So I kept fishing, even though the nets came up empty. Kept going out at dawn, following the same routes my father had followed, my grandfather had followed, my great-grandfather had followed. Kept performing the rituals even when they yielded nothing. Because what else could I do? I survived on my savings and Morag's pension. She'd been a teacher long enough to earn a small government stipend that continued after her death. I sold off equipment I didn't need. I let the cottage deteriorate around me. I became what the tourists saw when they drove through Foyers, a sad old man in a dying village, a relic of a way of life that the modern world had passed by. And then, in the winter of 1988, the lady spoke to me. Not with words. Not with sound. But I woke one morning in February to find myself standing on the dock in my nightclothes, in freezing rain, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. The boat was rocking in the water below me, and in my hand was the key to the engine, which I always kept hanging by the door. I understood, in the wordless way you understand dreams, that I was being summoned. That the lady wanted me to come out on the water. That something was about to change. I dressed in the dark, moving mechanically, and took the boat out as dawn broke grey and miserable over the eastern hills. I didn't bring nets. Didn't bring fishing gear. I simply motored out to the deep water, the place my father had warned me never to fish on the dark of the moon, and cut the engine. The water was utterly still despite the wind. Unnaturally still. And as I sat in the gently rocking boat, watching the rain dimple the surface, I felt the presence beneath me. Vast. Ancient. Patient. Waiting. The creature rose slowly, so slowly I didn't realize it was happening until the water began to dome upward beneath the boat. Not violent. Not threatening. Just a gradual displacement as something massive approached the surface from the depths. I gripped the side of the boat and waited. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't afraid. Not exactly. There was fear there, certainly, the primal terror any human feels when confronted with something immense and powerful and incomprehensible. But beneath the fear was something else. Recognition. As if some part of me had been waiting for this moment my entire life. The head broke the surface 20 feet from the boat. I'd seen it before, in glimpses, in shadows, in the brief moments when the creature had passed close enough to be visible. But this was different. This was deliberate. The creature was showing itself to me fully, completely, holding still in the water so I could see exactly what it was. The head was serpentine but not quite snake-like. The skull structure was wrong for a reptile. Too broad, too intelligent-looking. The eyes were enormous, dark and liquid and filled with something that looked disturbingly like thought. The skin was smooth, almost metallic in the grey light, covered in patterns that might have been scales or might have been something else entirely. The neck stretched upward, water sluicing off in streams, and I saw that it was longer than my boat. Saw the body beneath the surface, massive and dark, moving with slow undulations that barely disturbed the water. And then the creature opened its mouth. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Just opening. And I saw inside. There were no teeth. No tongue. Just a cavity that glowed with a soft, bioluminescent light, pulsing gently. And in that light I saw shapes. Symbols. Patterns that hurt to look at, that seemed to write themselves across my vision even when I closed my eyes. I don't know how long I stared into that impossible mouth. Seconds, probably, though it felt like hours. And as I stared, I began to understand. The creature wasn't showing me what it was. It was showing me what it had been, what it had become, the journey it had taken from something recognizable to something else entirely. Images flooded my mind, not memories, exactly, but impressions. I saw the loch as it had been thousands of years ago, when the ice was receding and the water was different, colder, connected to the sea through passages that no longer existed. I saw creatures, plural, not singular, living in those waters, hunting, breeding, thriving. I saw the passages closing. Saw the creatures trapped as the land rose and the water levels changed. Saw most of them die over the centuries that followed, unable to adapt, unable to survive in the changing environment. But one survived. The last one. And it survived by changing. By becoming something other than what it had been. By learning. By adapting in ways that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with something else, something I didn't have words for. The creature closed its mouth. The light faded. And I sat in my boat, shaking and sweating despite the cold, understanding nothing and everything simultaneously. Then the creature spoke. Not with sound. But I heard it nonetheless, felt it in my bones, in my blood, in the hollow spaces behind my thoughts. You have been respectful. You have been patient. You have honored the old ways even when others forgot. I have a task for you, Duncan Fraser. Will you accept? I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. What task? What are you carrying? I asked. The memory of my kind. Everything we were. Everything we knew. Everything we learned in the millennia before humans walked on two legs. I have held it since the last of my brothers and sisters died. But I am too weak now. Too close to the end. If I die carrying it, it will be lost forever. Will you accept this burden, Duncan Fraser? Will you become the keeper of memory? The creature's massive head tilted slightly, regarding me with those ancient, intelligent eyes. I am dying. Slowly, but dying. The water is changing. I am the last, and when I die, I must return to the deep places from which I came. But I cannot make that journey carrying what I carry. I need you to take it from me. To hold it. To keep it safe until the time comes to give it back. What are you carrying? I asked. The memory of my kind. Everything we were. Everything we knew. Everything we learned in the millennia before humans walked on two legs. I have held it since the last of my brothers and sisters died. But I am too weak now. Too close to the end. If I die carrying it, it will be lost forever. Will you accept this burden, Duncan Fraser? Will you become the keeper of memory? I should have said no. Should have rowed back to shore and tried to convince myself it had been a dream, a hallucination, the product of isolation and grief and too many years alone with the loch. But I didn't say no. I said yes. The creature gave me something that day. Something that changed me, changed how I see the world, changed everything I thought I understood about life and death and the nature of consciousness itself. The creature moved closer, its massive body gliding through the water with barely a ripple. It brought its head down until it was level with the side of my boat, close enough that I could have reached out and touched the smooth, metallic skin. Open your hands, it said, the voice resonating in my mind. Receive what I give. I held out my hands, trembling, not knowing what to expect. A physical object, perhaps. Some artifact or relic from the creature's ancient past. What I received was nothing I could have imagined. The creature's mouth opened again, that soft bioluminescent glow spilling out, and from the light came something that looked like water but wasn't water. It was luminous, viscous, flowing through the air like liquid smoke. It pooled in my cupped hands, warm and tingling, and as I watched in frozen fascination, it began to sink into my skin. Not through the skin. Into it. Absorbing like moisture into dry earth. The sensation was indescribable. Not painful, exactly, but overwhelming. I felt my hands grow hot, felt the warmth spread up my arms, across my chest, into my head. My vision blurred, filled with colors that had no names, shapes that existed in too many dimensions. I heard sounds, music, perhaps, or language, that seemed to come from inside my own skull. And then the memories came. Not my memories. The creature's memories. Its species' memories. Millions of years compressed into seconds, flooding into my consciousness like a dam bursting. I saw oceans that no longer existed, continents arranged in configurations that would have baffled any geologist. I saw creatures, dozens of species, hundreds, some recognizable as distant ancestors of modern animals, others utterly alien and impossible. I saw the world before humans, before mammals, before the great dying that ended the age of reptiles. I saw the ancestors of the creature swimming in warm, shallow seas, hunting, breeding, developing intelligence that grew with each generation until they were no longer merely animals but something approaching civilization. I saw their cities, not buildings made of stone or metal, but structures of living coral and shaped currents, communities that existed in harmony with the ocean rather than dominating it. I saw their art, their science, their philosophy. I saw them learning to manipulate the very fabric of life itself, to shape their own evolution, to transcend the limitations of flesh. And I saw it all end. The asteroid. The impact. The long, slow winter that followed. The oceans cooling, the food chains collapsing, the carefully built civilization crumbling as species after species went extinct. The desperate attempts to adapt, to survive, to preserve what they had learned through the apocalypse. Most failed. Entire bloodlines died out in the space of a few thousand years. But some survived by changing, by becoming smaller, simpler, more resilient. By sacrificing their civilization to maintain their existence. The creature, the lady, was descended from those survivors. The last living link to a species that had ruled the oceans for 50 million years before humans drew their first breath. When the visions finally stopped, I found myself on my knees in the bottom of the boat, gasping for air, my hands clutching the wooden plank so hard my knuckles had gone white. Tears were streaming down my face, not from pain, but from the sheer overwhelming weight of what I'd just experienced. The creature was still there, its head resting on the surface beside my boat, watching me with patient, ancient eyes. "You carry it now," it said. "The memory of what we were. The knowledge of what we knew. Guard it well, Duncan Fraser. Keep it safe. And when the time comes, when I call for you, bring it back to the water. Let it return to the deep from which it came." "How long?" I managed to whisper. "How long do I have to carry it?" "Years, perhaps. A decade at most. I am old, and the water grows less hospitable with each passing season. You will know when my time approaches. You will feel it. And then you must come to the deep water, as you have today, and return what was given." The creature began to sink, slowly, gracefully, its massive form disappearing back into the depths. "Thank you," it said, and the gratitude in those two words was so profound it nearly broke me. "Thank you for honoring the old ways. Thank you for respecting what you did not understand. You are the last of your kind, Duncan Fraser. Just as I am the last of mine. That is why you were chosen." Then it was gone, leaving only ripples on the water and the impossible weight of memory pressing against the inside of my skull. I rowed back to shore in a daze, my hands moving automatically through the familiar motions while my mind tried to process what had happened. The cottage felt wrong when I entered it, too small, too temporary, too human. Everything felt temporary now, fragile and fleeting, when set against the vast span of time I'd just witnessed. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw things that shouldn't exist, creatures swimming through impossible oceans, stars arranged in unfamiliar patterns, continents drifting across the globe in their ancient, slow dance. The memories weren't mine, but they felt more real than my own past, more vivid than anything I'd actually experienced. Over the following days, I began to understand the true nature of what I'd been given. It wasn't just memories in the sense of recalled experiences. It was knowledge, understanding, the accumulated wisdom of a species that had existed for orders of magnitude longer than humanity. I found myself knowing things I had no right to know. When I looked at the loch, I could see the geology beneath the water, could understand the flow of currents and the distribution of nutrients in ways that would have taken a team of scientists years to map. When I looked at the sky, I could read weather patterns weeks in advance, could sense the subtle shifts in atmospheric pressure that preceded storms. And when I looked at living things, fish, birds, even the sheep grazing on the hillsides, I could see their evolutionary history written in their bodies, could trace the lineage back through millions of years to ancestors that bore no resemblance to their modern descendants. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was lonely beyond words. Because I couldn't share it. Couldn't explain to anyone what I'd been given, what I now carried in my head. They would think me mad. They would lock me away or, worse, try to study me, to extract the knowledge through machines and drugs and invasive procedures that would destroy what I was meant to protect. So I stayed silent. Kept to myself. Became even more of a recluse than I'd been before. The villagers in Foyers stopped trying to talk to me. The tourists who occasionally wandered down to the dock would take one look at my face and turn away, sensing something in my eyes that made them uncomfortable. Stop here and think about what this means. What I'm carrying isn't just information, it's the last testament of an entire civilization. Everything they learned, everything they created, everything they were, compressed into the mind of one old fisherman who never asked for this responsibility. If you're still listening, if you understand the weight of this, then subscribe. Hit that like button if you believe some knowledge is too important to let die. Share this with someone who understands that sometimes the burden of truth is heavier than any physical weight. I tried to document what I knew. Spent months filling notebooks with diagrams and descriptions, trying to translate the alien concepts into human language. But it was impossible. The memories weren't structured in ways that could be expressed through words or drawings. They existed in dimensions of thought that human language simply couldn't reach. After a while, I gave up trying. The knowledge would remain in my head until the time came to return it. That was my duty. That was the burden I'd accepted. The years passed. 1989, 1990, 1991. I stopped fishing entirely. There was no point, with the nets coming up empty and no market for what little I might catch anyway. I survived on my savings and odd jobs around the village, repairing nets for the recreational fishermen who still worked the loch in small numbers, mending fences, doing manual labor that men half my age struggled with. The knowledge I carried made me stronger somehow. Not physically younger, but more resilient. I didn't get sick. Didn't feel the cold the way I used to. Didn't tire as easily. It was as if the memories of a species that had survived for 50 million years had granted me some small measure of their endurance. But I could feel the creature weakening. Even from miles away, even when I wasn't on the water, I could sense it in the depths. Growing slower. Growing dimmer. The bond between us, formed in that moment when it had poured its memories into my hands, let me feel its gradual decline like a distant ache that never quite went away. I started seeing it in my dreams. Not the visions of ancient history, but the creature itself, floating in the deep water, alone and tired, waiting for the end. Sometimes it would speak to me in these dreams, though the words made no sense when I woke. Sometimes it would just watch me with those enormous, intelligent eyes, and I would understand without words that it was grateful for my service, grateful that its species' legacy wouldn't die with it. The tourists kept coming, of course. More every year. The village of Foyers began to change, catering to the monster hunters and the curious. New hotels opened. Gift shops appeared, selling plastic toys and t-shirts with cartoonish images of a creature that bore no resemblance to the reality I'd witnessed. The loch became a commodity, a theme park, a joke. It made me angry in ways I couldn't express. They were dancing on a grave and didn't even know it. Celebrating a mystery while being completely blind to the profound truth beneath the surface. In 1993, I noticed the first real change. I was walking along the shore one evening when I felt a sharp pain in my chest, not a heart attack, but something else, something that resonated through the bond one shared with the creature. I stumbled, fell to my knees, gasping. In my mind, I saw the creature thrashing in the deep water, its movements uncoordinated, desperate. Something was wrong. The water was different somehow, warmer, more acidic, contaminated with chemicals that didn't exist when the creature's ancestors had ruled the oceans. The episode passed after a few minutes, but I knew what it meant. The creature was suffering. The loch was changing too quickly for even its remarkable adaptability to compensate. The end was approaching faster than either of us had anticipated. By 1994, I could barely leave the cottage. Not because I was physically weak, I was still stronger than most men my age, but because the bond had grown so intense I could no longer function normally. Every moment, I felt the creature's presence, felt its pain, felt its slow slide toward oblivion. The memories I carried grew heavier, more insistent. They pressed against the inside of my skull, demanding attention, demanding to be acknowledged. I would wake in the middle of the night, my head filled with images of oceans that no longer existed, and I would have to remind myself where I was, when I was, who I was. Duncan Fraser, I would tell myself. Born 1926. Fisherman. Widower. The last keeper of memory. The creature called to me more frequently now. Not with words, but with the pull of the bond, drawing me toward the water. Sometimes I would wake to find myself standing on the dock in my nightclothes, staring at the dark surface of the loch. Other times I would be halfway to the boat before I realized what I was doing, before I consciously decided to turn back. It was testing me, I think. Or testing itself. Making sure that when the final moment came, when it needed me to return the memories to the water, I would be able to respond. That the bond was strong enough to overcome any hesitation or fear. In the spring of 1994, I had a visitor. A young woman, maybe 30 years old, driving a battered Volkswagen and carrying expensive camera equipment. She knocked on my door on a Tuesday afternoon, and when I opened it, she introduced herself as Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, a marine biologist from the University of St. Andrews. Mr. Fraser, she said, her voice professional but kind. I'm doing research on the ecological changes in Loch Ness over the past few decades. I understand you're the last commercial fisherman working these waters. Would you be willing to talk to me about what you've observed? I should have sent her away. Should have closed the door in her face the way I'd done to countless journalists and researchers over the years. But there was something in her eyes, a genuine curiosity, a real desire to understand rather than exploit, that made me pause. "Come in," I said. We talked for 3 hours. She asked about fish populations, water temperature, clarity, seasonal patterns. I answered her questions carefully, sharing only what could be explained through normal observation, keeping the deeper truths hidden. But as we talked, I began to see the loch through her eyes, as a scientist who loved the water but didn't understand it, who wanted to protect it but lacked the knowledge of what truly needed protection. "The loch is dying," she said finally, her voice heavy with frustration. "The pH is changing. The oxygen levels are dropping. The fish populations are crashing. Something is fundamentally wrong with the ecosystem, and I can't figure out what. It's as if the loch itself is sick." "It is sick," I said quietly. "Or rather, something in it is sick. Something old. Something that's been keeping the balance for longer than you can imagine." She looked at me sharply. "What do you mean?" I almost told her. Almost revealed everything, the creature, the memories, the burden I'd carried for 6 years. But at the last moment, I held back. She wasn't ready. The world wasn't ready. "Just an old fisherman's superstition," I said instead. "Don't mind me." She left shortly after, clearly frustrated by my cryptic non-answers. But before she drove away, she turned back and said something that stuck with me. "If you know something, Mr. Fraser, if you've seen something that could help us understand what's happening to the loch, please tell someone. Before it's too late." I watched her car disappear down the rutted track, and I thought, it's already too late. It's been too late for millions of years. All we can do now is witness the end with grace and gratitude. I'm near the end now. Near the end of this confession, near the end of my duty, near the end of everything. If you've stayed with me this far, if you've listened to every word, then you understand what I'm about to do. Subscribe if you want to remember this story after I'm gone. Hit that like button if you believe some endings are necessary, even beautiful in their way. Share this with anyone who needs to know that not all mysteries should be solved, that some secrets are worth keeping until the very end. Yesterday morning, I felt it. The final call. The creature pulling on the bond with a strength that couldn't be denied, that wouldn't accept delay or hesitation. It was time. I woke at 3 in the morning, pulled from sleep by a sensation like drowning. Not painful, just overwhelming. The creature's presence filled my mind, eclipsing everything else. I could feel its exhaustion, its pain, its readiness to let go. But it couldn't let go. Not yet. Not until the memories were returned. I dressed in the darkness, moving through the cottage one last time. I'd written out instructions and left them on the kitchen table, where to find my will, who to contact, how to dispose of the cottage and the boat. My children would get what little I had left. They wouldn't understand, but they would be provided for. The boat started on the first try, despite not having been used in months. I took that as a good sign. The engine purred smoothly as I guided the Morag's Pride out into the loch, the dark water spreading before me like liquid glass. The sky was clear, unusually so for Scotland in November. The stars were brilliant overhead, and I could see my breath in the cold air. The temperature had dropped well below freezing, and the surface of the loch was beginning to ice at the edges. I motored to the deep water, the place where my father had warned me never to fish on the dark of the moon, the place where the creature had first spoken to me 6 years ago. Cut the engine. Let the boat drift in the gentle current. And waited. The creature rose slowly, even more slowly than before. I could sense the effort it took, the strain on a body that had endured for centuries but was finally reaching the limits of its endurance. The water bulged upward, and the familiar shape emerged, the serpentine neck, the broad head, the eyes that still held their ancient intelligence even as they dimmed with approaching death. "Duncan Fraser," the creature said, and its voice in my mind was weak, barely a whisper. "You have carried my burden faithfully. Thank you." "I did as you asked," I said aloud, my voice rough with emotion. "I kept the memories safe. I'm ready to return them now." "Then hold out your hands. Give back what was given." I extended my hands over the side of the boat, palms up, just as I had done 6 years ago. And I felt the memories begin to move, to flow, to extract themselves from wherever they'd been stored in my consciousness. It was the reverse of receiving them, the warm, tingling sensation, the liquid light pooling in my cupped hands. But this time, instead of flowing into me, it flowed out. 6 years of carrying the accumulated knowledge of a civilization older than humanity, and it was leaving me, returning to its rightful keeper. The light grew brighter as more of the memories emerged. I saw them now, could see the shapes and patterns within the luminous substance. Saw the history, the knowledge, the art and science of a species that had thrived when the continents were arranged differently and the stars were in different positions. When the last of it had left me, I felt empty. Lighter. Free of a burden I hadn't fully recognized until it was gone. But also diminished somehow, as if I'd lost something precious that I would never recover. The creature took the light into its mouth, absorbed it back into itself. For a moment, the glow intensified, illuminating the creature's entire head, and I could see the joy in its eyes. The relief. The completion. "Thank you," it said again. "You have given me what I needed to die in peace. The memories will go with me to the deep places. They will rest where my kind came from, where we belonged before the world changed. And perhaps, in some distant future, they will be found by those who come after us. Perhaps something of what we were will survive, even if we do not." "What should I tell them?" I asked. "The people who study the loch, who hunt for proof of your existence. What should I say?" The creature was already sinking, already beginning its final descent into the depths it would never leave. "Tell them the truth," it said, its voice fading. "Tell them I was not a monster. Tell them I was the last. Tell them that some mysteries exist not to be solved, but to be honored." And then it was gone. I sat in my boat as the first light of dawn broke over the eastern hills, watching the water where the creature had disappeared. The bond was gone now, severed when the memories returned to their proper keeper. I felt normal again, just an old man in a boat, no longer connected to something ancient and profound. But I wasn't the same person I'd been 6 years ago. How could I be? I'd carried the memory of a civilization in my head. I'd witnessed the rise and fall of a species that had ruled the oceans for millions of years. I'd seen the world from a perspective no other human had ever shared. I started the engine and turned the Morag's pride toward shore. The boat felt different now, just a boat, wood and metal and nothing more. The loch felt different too, just water, deep and cold and ordinary. But I knew the truth. I knew what had lived here, what had died here, what now rested in the deepest parts of the loch, carrying the memories of its kind into whatever waited beyond death. This is the end of my story. Tomorrow, the authorities will come asking questions about the old fisherman who disappeared in his boat. They won't find me because I've decided to follow the creature. Not to die, I'm not ready for that yet, but to leave. To disappear. To become a legend myself, perhaps. Another mystery for the monster hunters to puzzle over. But before I go, I need you to understand something. The creature was real. The memories were real. And now they're gone, resting in the deep water where they belong. The lake is just a lake again. The monster is just a legend. And that's how it should be. If this story moved you, if it made you think about what we've lost as a species, what we've forgotten, what we've destroyed in our rush toward progress, then subscribe to this channel. Remember this story. Tell it to others. Not as proof, not as evidence, but as a reminder that the world is stranger and more beautiful than we imagine. Hit that like button if you believe some mysteries should remain mysteries. If you believe that not everything needs to be caught and catalogued and explained. If you believe that sometimes honoring the unknown is more important than solving it. Share this with people who look at deep water and wonder what might be looking back. With people who understand that legends exist for a reason. With people who know that the last of something, whether it's a species, a way of life, or a truth, deserves to be remembered with respect rather than curiosity. The fisherman who came face to face with the monster of Loch Ness tells you this: it wasn't a monster. It was the last of its kind. And now it's gone, and the world is poorer for its absence. Remember the lady of the loch. Honor what she was. And leave the deep water in peace. This recording was found in the cottage of Duncan Fraser on November 18, 1994. Fraser himself was never found. His boat, the Morag's Pride, was discovered drifting empty near Foyers 3 days after he was reported missing. There were no signs of struggle, no indication of what happened to him. The search was called off after 2 weeks. No large aquatic animals have been reliably reported in Loch Ness since the winter of 1994. The mystery remains.